Hi, Dr. Morey, Uncivilized Vitality. I want to talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs today. So Abraham Maslow was an American psychologist, and in 1943, he published a paper called About Human Motivation. I can't remember the exact title of it, but you can Google Maslow's paper, 1943, where he produced this hierarchy of needs. It's typically shown as a triangle, so I'll do that, although he didn't originally conceive of it as a triangle. But the idea is, a lot of people think that because of his observation with some Native American tribes he spent time with and studying and learning, that he organized this idea of developmental needs. One of the big controversies, of course, is that they have to be performed in order before you can move on to the next stage, and we know that that's not exactly true. But controversy aside, Uncivilized Vitality finds this a very handy way to reference and order what you're going to do for your health and happiness. So if we talked about Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it was more of an interrelated aspects in your development. But it makes sense as a pyramid, as you'll see. So at the base of his pyramid, he put physiological needs. And then you have safety needs, physical safety, needs from harms, need from harm. We'll get into this in a minute. The next was your love or belonging. Above that need for love and belonging, you have a need for esteem. And above that was the top of his pyramid, more or less, self-actualization. And this was conceived of later as a pyramid because it kind of makes sense when we think of a hierarchy. One of the things Abraham Maslow talked about was, first and foremost, not just in your development, but in your everyday life, in order to remain healthy and happy, like in Uncivilized Vitality, you have to deal with certain, what I believe were referred to as deficiency needs. Like, you can't be missing these things first. These are needs that have to be fulfilled before anything else can happen. So you cannot have a deficiency here and build any of these other needs on top of that. It doesn't do you any good to develop self-esteem if you're not getting proper rest and sleep and nutrition, if that makes sense. So there is somewhat of an order to it. At least that's the way Uncivilized comes into it. Physiological needs. Maintaining body temperature, getting the proper nourishment, the way of caloric intake to stay alive, getting sleep, not being too hot, too cold. So you can think of this as getting the proper exercise. We make recommendations in proper movement, nourishment, and restoration. In Uncivilized Vitality, those are where our first three vital paths occur. I don't know why I'm messing up that V. You know how to spell movement. Moving on. So these deal with our physiological needs. We also deal with safety needs. Now, I need to be safe from disease, breaking down of my metabolic processes, predation, too much stress, these different things. So we teach about hygiene, all right? That's a big topic for another video. In Uncivilized Vitality, love and belonging, when you get to those, you need to, human beings are social animals, you need to interact with a community or beyond your family. You need the idea that you belong to a group. Human beings that are kept in isolation or babies that are never touched or have the interaction with their parents don't really bond or develop well. And this, obviously, is the basis of all of our teachings for community. So the vital paths belong to the base of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We talk about proper nourishment, movement, and restoration as meeting our physiological needs. Hygiene and some more, obviously there's some overlap, some movement would refer to our safety needs, avoiding being killed, staying alive, staying safe. Once that I have that feeling of safety, I'm taking care of myself, I need to have a sense of belonging in my developmental stage. And that's where we're going to follow our advice on developing community. Now, you belong to a community, you have esteem needs. People need to have self-respect, self-esteem, and they need to be esteemed by others. You need at least one other person, preferably more, to basically think good things about you, to enjoy you, to like you, to think you're a good person in order for you to have a stable psychological lifestyle or happiness. A lot of problems come here when we put too much esteem in one or two people's opinions, and there's a lot of things there we can unpack. But typically, in Uncivilized Vitality, we get out here and we start doing our fieldcraft. This is how you get out, you challenge yourself, you pass those, you meet those challenges, you gain self-confidence, you gain self-respect, you get some self-esteem. And this can be as simple as, there's a challenge. You've never slept outdoors overnight? Come with us on one of our overnight events. We go to northern Michigan in February, and you build a little snow shelter out of twigs and snow, and you spend the night in that, and you find food and water, and you handle all the difficulties that come up with living outside for the average civilized modern human. And you meet those challenges, you're going to get a huge sense of accomplishment and self-confidence and esteem. And the other people that went through that with you, there's a camaraderie and a respect amongst those of us that go out and do these events. And, that'll meet your needs for esteem. Now you get up into self-actualization. This is tough to unpack, and this has been further subdivided by Maslow and others into cognitive needs and creativity needs and transcendence, which is kind of like your spiritual needs. But mostly it boils down to be all you can be. I know it sounds like a commercial for the Army from the 80s, be all that you can be. But we meet this self-actualization in Uncivilized Vitality with the 13 tenets of our philosophy, our philosophical outlook. These give you plenty of ways to live your life, be all you can be, reach that full level of Jungian individuation that we talk about in Uncivilized Vitality, merging your consciousness and your unconsciousness and becoming a fully actualized human being, and our philosophical tenets deal with that. The other thing, I think we've mentioned some other videos, that's why Logan wanted me to throw this one together. He says I refer to this all the time, we didn't have a video on it. So another way we relate to Maslow's hierarchy of need is in the rule of 3's. You can think about this, the physiological need, these have to be met in a certain order. You're down here with 3 minutes. The 3-minute rule says this is all about oxygen and blood. You might want to feel good about being outside, not be scared or feel like you're part of the group. But if you've got a big cut and you're hemorrhaging outdoors or you can't breathe, those needs take precedent, obviously. So we teach people that if you have a big cut or you can't breathe, you're going into shock. Basically, trauma, first aid. Right here, this is the first level that has to be addressed, right? These are you got about 3 minutes to deal with that. Moving up to safety, we get the 3-hour rule. This is basically, and obviously there's some overlap. You got about 3 hours to regulate your body temperature, to protect yourself from exposure, prevent shock. Those needs have to be met first. So you got 3-minute type needs, and they'll kind of fall in line with your physiological needs, 3-hour needs that fall in line with your safety. This is going to be controlling your body temperature. O2, blood, basically traumatic first aid. And then you've got your body temperature regulation or exposure. That's going to be within your 3-hour need. Then you move up to what we call the 3-day needs. This is basically going to be water and sleep. You need to get proper rest, and you obviously have to stay hydrated. Doesn't necessarily correspond with love and belonging and esteem anymore, but just talking about how this corresponds with the idea of a hierarchy of needs. In Uncivilized Vitality, we talk about the rule of 3's. You got your 3-minute needs that have to be met before your 3-hour needs, before your 3-day needs of H2O and sleep. Then you got your 3-week needs. That's basically food. And then to round it out, we throw 3 months. And that's going to be some kind of contact with other humans, social or otherwise, etc. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs gives you the idea through human development. His claim was you need to meet these physiological safety needs before you can feel safe, or meet the needs of belonging or love needs in a group, before you can work on your self-esteem or respect for others, and before you can become a self-actualized full human being. Uncivilized Vitality kind of meets these in that order with our division of the health and wellness, 5 vital paths, the fieldcraft or the philosophy. And then, especially out in the fieldcraft, we have our own way to explain to people how to stay safe and healthy and happy in the outdoors or in your day-to-day life by going on the rule of 3's. You got 3-minute needs. These are oxygen and blood. You got to deal with that first before anything else. There's an accident or something, before you try to comfort someone and soothe their little duck feelings that have been bruised, you better make sure you got 3 minutes to deal with oxygen and blood before bad things happen. The next step on that would be you got 3 hours of exposure outside before you will die of hyper or hypothermia or shock or other things could happen. Obviously, it's not a hard, fast rule. You could be out all day, 7, 8, 9 hours of exposure, depending on the person, and be fine. Or you might get a half an hour of conditions where it'll drive you into hypothermia and you could die. Just going through this hierarchy of needs by 3's because it gives us a quick rule of thumb you can remember even when you're under a lot of stress, maybe outdoors. So after I make sure I'm not injured or bleeding and my tissues are being perfused properly, next thing I would deal with would be body temperature regulation. So in our emergency hierarchy, we say after first aid is shelter. Clothing, I need to stay warm, dry, or cool off or whatever. I need to protect myself from the elements. I got 3-hour window. The next step is going to be getting water and proper sleep. I get about 3 days to correct that. So it's not as big of an emergency. Once I've gotten first aid and shelter attended, my next priority, like especially in the woods, is a clean source of potable water and a safe place to sleep. A safe, dry, warm, comfortable, whatever place to sleep and rest. That could go back to your shelter. Then 3 weeks of food. I got 3 weeks. I got a lot of body fat. The average adult human could fast and be just fine. It's more of a psychological deterrent than anything. So people go out and they make, especially on YouTube, I'm not picking on anybody, bushcrafting or survival channels. They're always like, well, I never go in the woods without, some extra food or a snack bar or whatever. And that's great. But as far as the priority goes, that's not that big a deal. If an emergency happens, you have to go a couple days without food. Barring, of course, if you are hypoglycemic or diabetic or have some other sort of metabolic process where you absolutely should keep the food with you. In that case, that would become one of your physiological needs, and you might want to drop that down for your case to a 3-minute or a 3-hour blood sugar issue. But these are just generalisms. Food is not high on your priority. First aid and then shelter or fire would be the next, because fire, especially in Michigan, it's cold all the time. I can regulate my core temperature by using fire. I can also purify water, meeting my 3-day needs. So first aid, shelter, fire, then water. Then we talk about signaling and navigation on our emergency list, which would be another video. Because then if I get lost in the outdoors, I want to make sure I'm not bleeding, everything's going well. For first aid, I can control my body temperature, maybe using some personal shelter or some fire. And then I got to get a rest, so I make good decisions. I've got potable water. And then the food and contact take care of themselves. I got a huge window of opportunity to make that happen before I die of loneliness, if that makes sense. So when we put together our emergency kind of mindset and plan, having the rule of 3's as a hierarchy, and you can see, I hope you can see, I've explained how it sort of correlates, at least to the bottom or deficiency needs of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because he was a famous developmental psychologist in America, and he published this in a paper, which I can't remember the name of, in 1943. I think it was on human motivation. That might be it. Like, why do humans do what they do? He says because they're meeting certain needs of which they're hardwired in this kind of order. And then somebody put that in a neat little pyramid. Uncivilized Vitality, in an effort to help somebody become a fully realized individual, or Jungian individuation, we say happy and healthy optimization. Being as happy and healthy as you can, psychologically, a sound mind, a sound body. We have the 5 vital paths of movement, nourishment, restoration for your physiological and safety needs, hygiene, community, our Fieldcraft teachings, and then our 13 philosophical tenets kind of meet these Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now I've got a Maslow's hierarchy of needs to reference as a video. When I mention it in other ones, you can tag it back to this one. So if you like that, leave a comment. If you'd like any aspect of that explored in a little more detail, let me know in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this. The more exposure we get, the better the channel does. Hopefully, if the channel ends up monetized, this will be one of the revenue sources for the Uncivilized Living Foundation, which is our charity to get people out into nature and get those benefits of being outside and becoming a more fully realized human being. So, thanks.